A warm welcome to everyone present here today. I'm happy to say that we now have already got 26 participants on Zoom, so we're good to go. I'm honored and happy to see that this hall is so full today. We had a bit of a dry season lately, so I'm really glad for this. I'm honored to also welcome His Excellency Mr. Charles Moore from the British High Commission, as well as Kenneth Oisip, who are also present here today. Today's presentation has been initiated by Leon Boyer, sitting right in front here, who's been involved in game counting for quite some while now. And I'm very happy that we were able to get hold of Ms. Novald Iiyambo. Took us a couple of attempts, but we made it. Before we get to the process of game counting and the results that Ms. Iiyambo is going to share with us today, I would like to ask Mr. Leon to the front, to the mic, to please tell us a bit more about his involvement, as well as how he got to know Ms. Iiyambo and how he got to be involved in the whole game counting process.
Do I have to speak with the mic?
Yeah.
Whoa. Is it on, off? Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, first of all, I want to thank all the participants, everybody that's here tonight that managed to get out of their warm homes and come and attend this event. I want to thank the Scientific Society to bear with us. We tried many times to have a presentation on the game counts, and yeah, we managed eventually. Thank you, Novald. How did we get involved? There's one person that I have to point out. He laid the foundation for the game counts. Back then in the years 2017, 18, 2016, 17, when we were developing the park management stations in Khaudum, there was a warden, Jeremiah Mutenya, and he told us about all his challenges in the park. And one of the things was that we don't have statistics, we don't have the numbers, we don't have the wildlife numbers, we don't know what is really going on in the park. And one of the challenges was that there's like 13 water holes. Now we've got 14 water holes that has to be manned for 3 days on a full moon waterhole game count to collect all that information. So they didn't have the manpower. And one of the ways how to do that was then to get the public involved, to get us, the Friends of Khaudum, involved. And we started off, the first count we had was in 2018. Only a few water holes we covered, and we saw it could work, and there was a lot of interest. And then we pushed it on from there on. And in 2019, we, as from the private sector, the private individuals, we managed to get all the water holes covered. And I actually want to thank Jeremiah. Can you just maybe stand up for us? He's the man who actually started this whole thing. So unfortunately, he's not in the park anymore. But the Friends of Khaudum will continue, and we will build on this. Now, in 2019, Jeremiah also had a report prepared. He had a good evaluation. Unfortunately, we were not able to present it for other reasons. And then last year, we planned, or the year before last year in 2020, we planned to have 2 counts. And then the whole COVID thing snowballed us, and we were lucky to have 1 count. So, and last year we managed to have 3 counts in 1 year, August, September, and October. And hopefully today we can hear from Novald what the outcome, what the results are of all this effort we've put in. We have to thank the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism for giving us, the private sector, this opportunity. It's really a privilege because it's the only park in Namibia where we as private people can go or can come and do a game count. And this is important for us because we also learn a lot. We appreciate we learn the efforts, the challenges, everything you have with wildlife management, with park management. But with that, we're trying to help you, but we do appreciate that you allow us to do this. And let's hope we can continue so in future. So, yeah, game counts are done basically it's part of park management tools. It's one of the tools that the ministry needs to make decisions on park management. And one way of doing that in a landscape like Khaudum, where you've got fixed water holes, we do this in the summertime, in the hottest, driest time of the year. And that means we have to occupy all the open waters. And we have to count for 72 hours non-stop. So there's a few newcomers here just to get them on speed. You need at least 6 people. It's getting too tough if you're fewer than 6 people. Ideally, probably 8. You sit at the waterhole for these full 3 days a night. So you have to gear yourself accordingly. It's like you've got a breakdown somewhere along the road and you're waiting for 3 days for a rescue service. That's almost how you have to prepare yourself. Yeah, having said that, I want to welcome all our Zoom guests. I'm sure there's a number of them that would actually want to be here. They're mostly from Germany, Switzerland, and Austria, but they've got better weather than us at the moment. It's freezing cold here, but we are having glühwein, so we are fine. So, having said that, I think it's time to introduce Novald. Novald completed her undergraduate studies in environmental science at UNAM in 2014. She was a research technician at Gobabeb Station from 2013 to 2015. Then she went on, she completed a postgraduate study in Pretoria University and obtained a master's in zoology in 2019. Then she's also been a part-time lecturer at UNAM from 2019 to 2021. That was the easy part of her life. Then all the problems started. She met the Friends of Khaudum. She got employed in April 2021 with the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism as a senior conservation scientist. She's based in Susue in Babwata East. That's her duty station. And her function is basically to monitor and to research all the high value and vulnerable species. So Khaudum game counts, the Khaudum area falls under her area. And it's time for Novald to tell us what's the findings of all these game counts.
Thank you for that introduction. I've just renamed him from Leon to Lion tonight. It's very easy, you just replace E with an I. So I just want you to know a few facts that I've only been born. I'm only 1 year old in the ministry, so 1 year and 2 months. And that would also mean I'm 1 year and 2 months in Khaudum. So I do understand some aspects of the movement in terms of science, but then I would also appreciate the flow if you can also just help me understand everything else that I'm going to talk about, because most of you have been active in the game count for longer than myself. You probably understand the patterns better than me, but there's always a starting point. So I feel very honored to, after, I forgot his name now, after Jeremiah, because he was the first one to be involved in the game count as a warden in Khaudum. I also feel very honored to be the very first one to present it. So I'm going to talk to you about or rather this is a feedback for most of us that have been involved in the 2021 game count. The 2019 and 2020, we are going to have all the three combined into like the booklet for the next game count. So for now, I'm just going to share with you the results of the 2021 game count and a lot more interesting things that are happening at the moment in Khaudum and areas closer to Khaudum. Okay. So before I get into everything, I have to introduce the whole concept. Why Khaudum? Why is Khaudum special and all this? So Khaudum National Park actually preserves a lot of biological diversity like we know it. We have been around the area. You can tell it's very different in all the different parts of the landscape. And it also functions to sustainably use biological diversity, which is the wildlife that you'd find all the way from the tiny little ones to the large herbivores, the plants and insects. And it also promotes conservation of these individuals that are within Khaudum National Park. So I have a few facts here that are very interesting, and these are the ones that actually would make Khaudum a special place, maybe if I'm to compare it to any other parks in Namibia. So Khaudum is a habitat for the rare Rhone Antelope and Tsesabi. And it's the only park in Namibia where you have all the historical occurring of the large carnivore. And we have, Khaudum has the largest number of free roaming wild dogs. And also Khaudum has or hosts the largest population of the Rhones in Southern Africa. Yes. So why do we have Khaudum? I believe we have Khaudum because we want to conserve the wildlife. And conserving means you want the number of individuals to actually increase. But that will also depend on the area that they cover, whether they can be supported by that amount of area available or the habitat. So for us to actually ensure that populations do actually increase, we have to manage a few things in the park, which is an example of fire regimes. And then as well, we have to balance the browsers and the grazers, and also balancing the competing species because it's a food web or rather a food chain. So if there is a higher number of a certain, let me say, predator versus the prey that are available, so the whole balance will be lost. And we also have to actually manage the water resources like we know it in Khaudum. We have a large number of elephants and they're all over fighting for water. So we need to make sure there is enough water for not only the elephants, but all the other wildlife. Otherwise, the populations wouldn't increase because water is one of the basic needs of every living species. So what factors actually now contribute to animals moving? So animals move for so many reasons. And when they move, it actually represents their behavioral and ecological functions. So animals move for a lot more reasons. And I can say in terms of wild animals, they move to navigate to find certain things. They also move for reasons for migrating from one area to another, as well as dispersing. This just depends on whether there's enough of all the resources that they need, which would also include mating partners, otherwise they would disperse, and also searching for food. And the factors that would affect those four, there is both abiotic and biotic factors. This is natural and unnatural factors that will affect the movement of wildlife. So one of it is fences, and us as Khaudum friends, I'm sure we know about this. We have a fence on the western side, no, eastern side of Khaudum. Artificial water points also affect the way animals move because they will be driven to move to an area where there's water because they know there's water there, so I'd go there. Also, seasonality will affect the patterns of how wildlife move. I put dry versus wet season in terms of human settlement because you would understand that animals or wildlife highly moves to the human settlement during the drier seasons. This is because in the wetter seasons, there is more water everywhere else in the veld compared to the dry seasons where they will end up going into the human settlements in search for water. The rainfall patterns across varying landscapes also affects affects the movement of wildlife. So as breeding, like I've said before, like an animal would move to go and find a mating partner because this is a biological function of every other wildlife. So we have many threatened species, and these are highly becoming now, or they are prone to conflict with humans, and these species that are threatened actually become confined into a very small area, and most of these areas are also, okay, they are protected, but they're also increasingly becoming smaller in space because they are now becoming more surrounded by human settlement, and you can't expand these areas no longer. So therefore, we have made efforts here and there to actually protect these small areas that we have. And the reasons why we are conserving or making an effort to actually protect these areas is because we are trying to aid or to allow the dispersal of these individuals, and this will increase the gene flow. In simple terms, if you have a population that is only confined within one area, if it continues to breed for longer without exchange of genetics from outside the area, it can contribute to weaker individuals. This is because of weak genes that might actually wipe out the entire population. We also make an effort to protect these areas just to rescue the smaller subpopulations that may actually become susceptible to local extinction. Otherwise, long-term inbreeding, like I've said, it will raise recessive breeds that are highly prone to diseases, weakness, and reduced capacity to actually survive. Having shared that bit of conservation techniques, we get into the Khaudum game count. So it was conducted in the 3 months, like what Leon said. That was in August, September, and October, in those dates. And I have this map of Khaudum that I have here. I just have it to explain to you that the information that is going to follow is actually arranged in increasing latitude. So I've ordered the water points from bottom to top. So basically from south to north. That's because I'm trying to link latitudinal influence on the data that we have. By that, I just mean latitude does affect environmental conditions because if I can say, when you are up here, if you look at the landscape versus there, and even if I'm not wrong, the rainfall patterns are not similar. So that's why I've decided to order the results in that format. Okay, so the first result I'm going to share is species abundance for the whole entire game count. So in simple terms here, I'm just trying to explain what abundance would mean if there's any of us that doesn't know. This is just a total number of individuals that you have in a certain community or area. An example that I have here, you have 2 different communities and they have different species in terms of number. So the blackbird, you can see it's more than the secretary bird, the kiwi, and chickadee. It's called the chickadee. So in this case, these two communities are similar in abundance because basically you're just counting individual species. So that is what abundance is. So moving on to our slides. So this is the first result of our game count. So like I told you, I've ordered the water holes in increasing latitude. And then I have here both all the months, August, September, and October. And the lines that you see, the dotted lines, that is linear regression, which is actually, I'm trying to link now how latitude influences what we have here. So now, you can see that in terms of, okay, let's see, the species abundance in terms of months, it was higher in September, even though it was actually decreasing with increasing latitude. Yes, and then it was fairly constant in October. So I hope any of us that were present at the game count in October would probably know what caused that. Does anyone remember? No. Rain, yes. I think the second day, if I'm not wrong, it started raining, and then after that, we couldn't see as many individuals anymore. So that us not seeing individuals doesn't mean we have lost. It just explains that the animals actually move away from the water holes when it rains because there's a lot of water elsewhere in the park. So we can see that Tarikora and Tsoanafontein, here is Tarikora and Tsoanafontein is there. So we had a high number of individuals. This is daily species abundance. So basically I've added up all the species that we have seen over 3 days, and then I've divided that by 3 to get an abundance for a single day. So this would mean in a day you would expect to see about 500 individuals in Tarikora and about 400 in Tsoanafontein, and that's all in September. And you have as less than 100 species at Iiyambo, but we know that the conditions of all the water holes are not similar, they are very different. Then we move on to another factor called species richness. So this is where we consider the different types of species within a specific water hole, not just a total average of what we have seen. So back to our example. So remember the abundance was the same. It's 10 on both communities. But if you look at the species type, like you have that species, you have the secretary, they have the kiwi, and then chickadee. So it's 4 on both sides. So the species richness in these two communities is actually the same, irregardless of the total number of individuals per species. Okay, so now the highest species richness was recorded at Liupan, and that was in October. So that means we saw a lot more different types of animals at Liupan in October than at any other waterhole among the 3 months. However, if we are to look at the regression line that we have here, there was species richness was high, if I'm to compare the months, was higher in August and lowest in October again. We know why. Even if it was decreasing with increasing latitude. So it means as you move south of Khaudum, you'd experience more species compared to moving north of Khaudum, which is like Khaudum Fontaine. Then we move on to the third result, which is species diversity. This actually combines both the abundance and this different types of species that we saw at the waterholes. So here the definition is just the number of different species found in a specific ecological community, and it represents the species richness or the number of species found in an ecological community, as well as the abundance, and then the distribution, or rather the evenness. Evenness is okay, how in simple terms, how do we put it? equal number of species. So look at the two communities. You have community A and B. Remember, the abundance was the same on both communities. So is the species richness. And then what would be the diversity? So this is the result that I'm going to explain in the next few slides in terms of our Khaudum game count. So in simple terms, the species diversity has a very long formula. I'm not going to go through this. It's just to show you that I had to calculate this to actually get to the final numbers that I'm going to show you. So look at that. So showing you the formula that just passed in the past slide, you can see that abundance is the same on both communities. So is this richness. However, the diversity was different. So the higher the number, the higher the species diversity. So between these two communities, this community had a higher diversity or evenness of species because you almost had an equal number of individual space in that community compared to here. You see there's more of the blackbird. There were 7, 2, 4, 6, 7 compared to there are only 2, and then only 1 secretary bird, 1 kiwi and 1 chickadee compared to this community. So this community is more even compared to this one. So that's what I'm going to discuss in the next slide. So for our game, in our game count, so the species diversity in terms of waterhole in month, it was highest at Swanefontein, and that was in August. But if we are to compare between months, the species diversity was highest in August, even though it was also decreasing with increasing latitude. So you had more species diversity in the southern part of Khaudum versus the northern part of Khaudum. And then we continue. In the previous slide, I have compared the diversity in months across the waterholes. So now here I've calculated the diversity monthly, comparing August, September, and October. So remember in the previous slide, or all the other results that I've discussed, there was less of abundant species and diversity in October because I was comparing individual waterholes. But then if I'm to combine the data, there was actually more species diversity in general in October than any other month. Then I move on to discussing species-specific movement patterns. This is still related to the Khaudum game counts. Before I get to that, I just want to point out a few things why certain species are actually important and needed. So one of it is the elephant, like I've said. This is an umbrella species, and it also functions as a keystone species because it can transform habitats as much as it's a destructive individual, if I'm to say. It's still needed in the ecosystem for that particular function. So it knocks down trees, but it also helps other species actually benefit from that. It also pulls up grass, and then it plows trails through the dense bushes that allows for other individuals to pass through. And it also digs for water that other animals cannot access. So even if you see it uprooting a tree, it's not being destructive, it's helping other smaller ones. Like I've said before, wildlife movement here is actually affected by so many factors. Here is just images to show you that animals move for certain reasons. They move to find water, they are crossing roads. That also affects their movement because they have to move from one-sided habitat to the other one, and also puts them at some kind of risk. And then they also have to cross the fences. So if a fence is proof to the animals, then they might not necessarily cross it. That means their movement pattern will be diverted either to follow along the path or find along the fence or find another direction. Then it brings us to discussing the elephant movement in the Khaudum game count. Like the previous results I've discussed, I'm still comparing between the 3 months within the waterholes. So we had more elephants in Leeuwpan and Swanefontein, but that's in 2 different months. So Leeuwpan had the highest elephants in August, whereas Fontaine, we have recorded more elephants in September. And the lowest number of elephants recorded was Saipan and Fontaine in August. But if I consider the linear regression, which is trying to link it to latitudinal factors, so we had a higher we had a higher number of elephants in September, even if it was decreasing with increasing latitude. So it meant from the southern Khaudum, we had more elephants in the south as compared to the north. So I will get into the discussions later, because I also want to understand why would we have more elephants in the north, in the south, than in the north of Khaudum. Sorry? Oh, okay. Then we move on to the Rhone antelope. This is one of Africa's largest bovids, and it's only exceeded in size by the African buffalo and the eland, so it's number 3 on the list. And according to the IUCN conservation status, it's actually least concern. But if the present trends of human destruction on the environment actually continue, status may eventually decline, and this can threaten the status of this individual, and it may actually disappear from large parts of its current range due to poaching and loss of habitat. So like I said, the Rhone is very important in Khaudum because this is where we have the largest population of Rhones in Southern Africa. So looking at the results, we had a high number of Rhones almost everywhere. So we had a higher number of Rhones in Tarikora and Liupan and Tsao, but Tarikora is both throughout August and September. So is Liupan and Tsao. But then look at this, Omuramba. Throughout the 3 months, we had a very less number of Rhone antelopes recorded, as well as Fontaine. I don't know if we have any participants in the room that were actually part of the either Omuramba or Fontaine, but we'll get to the discussions later. And then I also continue to animal class specific movement patterns. So this is where I've classified them into mammals, carnivores, and birds. So in terms of mammals, we had a high number of mammals in Tarikora, Fontaine, and Liupan, but Tarikora had the highest in both August and September, and in Fontaine was only in September. But look at that. How come suddenly there was a high number of mammals in September, but comparing to August and October? And then, which other one did I find very weird? Okay, that's almost fair enough. So in terms of latitude, again, you had a high number of mammals in the southern Khaudum compared to the northern Khaudum. And then we move on to the carnivores. We recorded a high number of carnivores in Tarikora and Sonkana and Ilands Vlachte. How do you pronounce that? Vlachte. You didn't teach me, Lian. Okay, so, yes. We had a high number of carnivores in Tarikora, and I think the most carnivores that were recorded here were wild hyenas and wild dogs. Yes, and leopards, yes. So this is also very interesting that suddenly in August, we had a high number of carnivores compared to August and October in Tarikora. So something must have happened there. I don't know what it is, but maybe we'll find out. And then we move on to the birds. We had a high number of birds in Liupan, Tarikora, and Omuramba. And I know why we had a high number of birds in Liupan. This is because Liupan has an open kind of birth area for the vultures. So there was a high number of vultures recorded at Liupan. And between Omuramba and Tarikora, there's a particular bird species. I'm not sure about the name, but I think Leon and Crystal would know the name. I think it's one of the beautiful birds, colorful ones. I don't know the name. But they usually come and also bath in Omuramba and Tarikora because there's kind of an open area with water. Yes. So looking at the regression line that is speaking for latitude, there was a constant linear regression in September, but then there was an increase, a high increase in October as you move southern Khaudum to northern Khaudum. Which is the gray dotted line. So that means the number of birds have actually increased as you move from southern Khaudum to northern Khaudum, but that was in October. So both September and August were more fairly equal, so to say. Okay, that was almost it about the game counts, but now I continue to other more interesting activities that are actually happening around Khaudum and areas close to Khaudum. So I'm going to discuss wildlife monitoring activities that we have going on in this area. So I love presenting this graph for a very good reason. I'm not sure if we'd all like it, but so this is elephant movement in the northern eastern parts of Namibia, which also falls part of the Khaza region. So these are just individual elephants that have been collared in the northeastern regions. And you can see that these individuals are not crossing this line, which is the boundary between Namibia and Botswana. So is that because we do have fences there and these individuals are not crossing. Very few are crossing, but which ones are crossing? We'll get to that in the next slide. So I'm not sure if we're all aware, but there is an activity where we're actually engaging governments to Namibian and Botswana governments to actually work on removing the fences because they are constricting or the animals in one particular area. And if we are to look at Khaudum, you can also testify that we have a very large number of elephants and it's increasing yearly. And it's going to become a problem because in terms of stocking capacity, the habitat might not be able to support that number of individuals any longer, and they might be forced to actually move out. And on the western side of Khaudum, we do have communal farms, if I'm not wrong. So that means these elephants, like you can already see, they're starting to disperse out of the park, which can be good for the elephants on one side and not good for them. So is the humans. So, like I said, there are a few individuals that are actually crossing these boundaries. This map is only colors of males, and this map is colors of females. So you can see that this is one of the boundary that we have in that side as well. This is in Botswana, and this is the delta. So the females are actually not going out of any of these fences, but the males, these are the males. You can see that very few of them, and these are the big bulls, they have the stamina to actually cross because they are going to find mating partners. So this is actually very sad for the elephants because they are not living the normal life that they should be because now they're being restricted by a fence that is there. And to mention, I've just been told because I didn't know about it, Pete Beitel told me that the same time that these collars were put up, I think, I don't know which year, but maybe some of us would know, that is when about 500 elephants were killed by bacteria that was found within the water. Yes. So imagine if you can't move these animals out of this area and a particular virus or bacteria breaks out, then what happens to the entire population that is there? Then we move on to the lion movement patterns in the same region. We have individual lions that are collared in the northern eastern region, which is also Kaza. You can see that they are also dispersing out of the Khaudum Park, so is Bwabwata. But the disadvantage or the bad thing of these lions actually moving, most of them that actually end up moving out of the park, they end up being dead. They never come back alive, which is another sad story. And then this is another movement pattern of spotted hyena. We collared a few in Khaudum. They move out. They can, I'm sure they can fit through the fence or find a way to pass through. They've been to the Delta. I don't have the figures on spotted hyenas actually being killed as much as the lions in the neighboring areas around the farm, but I'm sure if the farmers come across any of these large carnivores because they are preying on their livestock, they'll definitely eliminate, which is still not good for the spotted hyenas. And I have a very good story to tell, but I'll share a map later. We have collared a spotted hyena. I'm not sure which year it was. No, it was last year. Yes, October in Tarikora. There was a spotted hyena that was collared in Khaudum, and in the 9 months that I've been tracking it, it moved all the way out of Khaudum through Kavango West, through Mangeti, all the way to Ochivarongo. Then it came up to Matako Mountain, then Okahanja, then Ventuk. Then it was also at the Hosea Kutako Airport. Then now it's back again between Ochivarongo and Omatako Mountain. That's in 9 months, but I'll get the map for you once I have it all figured out and I can share with you. This is just to show you that animals actually do move for very long distances. They go very far because they are hunting. Like you can see here, look at that. Crazy movement patterns. And then this is the movement pattern for the wild dogs. So comparing wild dogs to spotted hyenas, the lions and the elephants, they probably don't move as much. Maybe they have a very small home range, and which is also determined by their body size. So they also do venture out of Khaudum in the south and in the north. These were only 3 collars. And definitely they are also a threat to the neighboring areas because we do have farms on the western side, but this is a conservancy. It's the Nyanyai Conservancy. Okay, then we move on to the southern grand hornbill. This is a new baby. It's my new baby, actually. So the southern grand hornbill is actually vulnerable. This is because one example that I can give is the fires. That's why we're saying we need to control the fires. These birds nest in the biggest trees that you can find in any other area. So if we don't control the fires, we'll lose the nesting habitats. And this particular individual only lays 2 eggs in a, not sure, do we have it here? In 9 years, yes. So in 9 years, yes. So they have a very long breeding cycle. So they can, let me say every 9 years, that's when they can lay 2 eggs. But in those 2 eggs, luckily only one would mature into an adult because the eggs are usually laid a week apart. And when one egg hatches earlier than the other, they usually abandon the other one. They don't incubate it anymore. And that means the population, the entire population of this individual is actually threatened or vulnerable because it needs more years to actually just produce one individual. And we need as many for this individual to actually, for this species to actually survive. So this is actually a new project, and we started off with just collecting, or when you drive around any other park in the northern eastern parts, because you'll only find these birds in the northern eastern parts of Namibia. So we started off with just recording the GPS positions, and if you're lucky enough to know the differences between the males and females, then you can differentiate them. And we have been building the database of all these sightings that we've been receiving from many of us. And the reason behind that is because we actually want to find their natural nesting grounds. That's because we want to put a few tags on the individuals, and it will help us understand the movement patterns just the same way how we have seen for other animals that I've just explained before. And also, it just helps us understand the social aspects of community influence on this particular species, because in some ethnical cultures, it's regarded as a bad bird if you are to see it. So some people would kill it if they see it closer to their area. So that's why we also need some kind of community outreach to just educate the people about the value of this individual. Then we can conserve it better. So what we plan to do is to actually also set up artificial nests for these individuals, because we have lost so many bigger trees now. This project has already been successful in South Africa, and this is specialist called Lucy Kemp, and she's the one we are working on to actually try and achieve better from the Namibian side as well. So it involves, these are artificial nests that were set up in South Africa. I'm not sure about the specific locations, but this is also what we are trying to replicate. So we find the nests, we see the condition of the nests, we put up artificial nests, and then we see if they actually start breeding in those artificial nests. And also apart from that is as soon as the eggs are laid, we try to what? Sorry, we try to rescue the second egg, like I told you. So what happens in the project is they take the second egg and then they help actually incubate the egg until the chick is born, and it gets reintroduced in other families. It has been successful in South Africa. Unfortunately, I can't show you all the other details because it's just a new project, but it's actually very lovely and it's getting somewhere. So I think a month ago, we've just carried out a community outreach workshop kind of thing, where we tried to actually develop a policy for management of this individual species. And we hosted that in Katima Mulilo, where we invited a lot of conservancy members, and it was a success. We are working on the policy. And many of you maybe have seen this post or advert going around. It's not fake, that's my number. It's just for you to actually help us out in the whole entire country to try and conserve what is ours. It's not an individual thing. We need to work together. Oh, sorry. And the good news is we have just received funding to actually start working on the artificial nest and the whole entire project. And that is very lovely. We also do pangolin monitoring. So this is for the confiscated individuals. We don't take the natural or the individuals within their natural habitats to take them, because this is also one of the species that it's a high value species that is protected worldwide. So the tags that we have, we actually put them on the confiscated individuals. And I can say at the moment, I have come to understand that it's not only about tagging the individuals, because you'll see in the next images that we tried to take a few, but still they end up dying for several reasons, which I will explain. So that's myself. I tagged a pangolin that was confiscated in Katima, and it was kept in captivity for a week, and it was being fed bread. Yes, and we know it eats ants and termites, but it was being fed bread. So what happened, I think, after we received it and tagged it, because it was dehydrated, it was starved, it only survived in the wild for 2 days. And then it was, I'm not sure really if it died like a natural death and then preyed on by a leopard, or the leopard killed it and then took it as a meal. That's the evidence. I had to retrieve the tag just after 2 days. So after that, I actually met, I forgot the lady's, Karina, I forgot the surname, but she's based in Stellenbosch. She works on pangolins, and I just found out that they actually have a rehabilitation center where they house all the confiscated pangolins. They house them there, they treat them, they feed them before they can actually release them out in the wild, and it gives them a better chance of survival. And I thought we also as a country should venture into that, because it really makes no difference when we save them from the poachers and they still end up being dead. Yeah, so this is all that we all need to work on. If we do have some funds, you can also assist in these projects. Then it brings us to discussing the challenges that we have experienced in the game count. These are some of them that have been pointed out by the participants. If I have missed some, we can as well put them up and discuss them. So one of it was the lack of sophisticated equipment to actually help us see the animals at night. The night vision equipment, which will enable us to differentiate between a spotted hyena and a brown hyena. And the other challenge also was a lack of species identification. It can be related to the fact that we don't have the good equipment to do that, especially at night, or even during the day if we don't have the binoculars to see far, or also if we really do not understand as individuals the differences between particular species, like if this is a springbok or an impala. Another challenge, this is the third challenge. This is the one I've experienced when I was entering the data, which is the zero estimates of large herds of animal. There's a point where some groups just wrote a large number of elephants, but in statistics, I can't use that. I need an estimate. So we just need to estimate. If you think there are 50, 100, just put it up. All along, in the end, everything else it's an estimate. So I can't use the term too many elephants or too many lions or too many of anything. And also, the other challenge that I've experienced is data entry and analysis. So I highly need assistance, but maybe this is my fault because I didn't speak out earlier, but I'm still saying it out. I need assistance, especially when it comes to entering the data. We do have a format already of how we want the data to be entered from now on till forever, because we want to standardize and keep it consistent. And then we move on to other challenges related to elephant studies or management. Like I've shared with you that we have a few collars on elephants and we do have to manage them. So there was, okay, one of it, we are unable to actually investigate the collars that have stopped functioning in the neighboring countries. Sometimes, sorry, an elephant goes to Botswana and then the collar stops functioning. Sorry. Whether the elephant is still alive or the collar is just the one that is not functioning, you wouldn't know, because it's not as easy to just drive across to go to Botswana and say, I'm looking for my collar. So we need some kind of transboundary collaboration. And then the other challenge also is that the elephant movement is limited by the southern boundary of Bwabwata, like I've shown you, with Botswana, as well as the eastern boundary with Khaudum National Park. So we need to let the elephants move freely, otherwise it's going to present a challenge to us. because now the small scale farmers on the western side of Khaudum will suffer elephant-human conflict in the near future because of that. And also the increased population density of these elephants will actually lead to them dispersing, especially the young bulls, and it can cause problems on commercial farms. And we are already experiencing this, for example, in Grootfontein areas. Then it brings us to recommendations, and this is game count related. This is one of the recommendations I received from some of the participants, whereby there is a need for emergency information for teams, what to do and what not to do in certain situations. And then the second recommendation, that one is personally from myself, because it will help us understand the broader picture of why we are getting certain numbers of individuals at a certain waterhole. So we need to note down the conditions of the waterholes during the count, and it will help us with understanding the use of the water points, because I remember in the 2021 game count, some of the waterholes were actually cleaned by the participants. Some we found them not functioning, and that also affected the results that we got at the end of the day. And if we are to be realistic about that, then it won't be exactly correct for us to say that we only saw 10 elephants at Swanefontein, because we know the reason why it's only 10, because the elephant trough is blocked by something. There's no water, they can't drink there. So we can't estimate the elephant population in that particular waterhole. Then the recommendations that I've received regarding what do we do with the many elephants that we have in Khaudum. One recommendation that I received was we can cull the big heads and make beef and leather from them. It could be a solution also. Removal of fences between Namibia and Botswana, which is critical but stable. And then replacement of collars in time for continuous long-term data collection. That is, from my side as a scientist, it's pointless when you only have data on an elephant for 1 year, because an elephant has a very huge home range, and for you to generally understand its behaviors and patterns, you need long-term data. It can be 10, 20, 50 years, for as long as an elephant is alive. Yes, then it helps you have better management procedures in place as well. So we need to work on that, being able to retrieve the collars before they actually die and replace whatever needs to be replaced. I'm not sure if it's just the batteries or the whole collar, but we need continuous long-term on individuals that have already been collared. We don't need to collar new ones, because that's like starting over again. And then recommendations regarding park management. The first one I've received from participants, whereby we need rain gauges for each waterhole. And I preferably would advise automatic, because we can't have individuals that are driving over to all these 14 waterholes to check on the rain gauges. I was working in Gobabeb, and I remember SASCAL. I'm not sure how many of us know about the SASCAL program, but it has funded several weather stations in the Namib Naukluft, and it measures a lot of parameters, which also includes rainfall, and these are all automatic stations, and we could also have those at maybe our water points or several other locations in the park, but I don't know how that will survive the elephants. And the other beautiful recommendation that I've actually observed, or we have observed, many of us, is that the reason that we didn't count as many animals in October after the rain, it could mean that we can basically close off the artificial water points during the rainy season and give an opportunity for repairs and maintenance on these waterholes, because the animals don't really use them as often because there's more water everywhere else in the park. Then it brings me to appreciation, because we wouldn't have discussed any of this if it wasn't because of all of us here. So I would like to appreciate the groups that actually pumped water at certain water holes during the count. I can't remember exactly which ones anymore, but I know there was such a point where some of the participants had to clean them out because some were blocked, and it actually helped with seeing more animals at the water holes. And also cleaning the water holes. Tarikora was also cleaned by the participants, and thank you very much for that. And all other help that I haven't recognized here is appreciated. And like what Leon said, we need to appreciate that this is actually a privilege given to us because it's the only park in Namibia where such an activity is allowed. Thank you. Question time and recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Novald. I think you've done a great job. What I was missing is where's the comparison, the annual trends? Yeah, in the booklet. But we don't have money for new booklet for this year. Okay. Okay. I didn't follow the whole your whole presentation, but thank you so much. No, questions, please. I'm sure there's a couple of questions. Okay, there's a question from the audience with regards to hornbill sightings. If you visit Botswana and you see hornbills in Botswana, can you also give that information to Novald?
I would say yes, even though I work for the Ministry of Namibia. As a scientist, birds don't only live in Namibia. They can fly out into Botswana. So us getting the position of them in Botswana will also be helpful because we can as well start to engage the Botswana counterparts and venture them into the same project that will actually help us conserve the whole species transboundary wise.
Okay, other questions? Jeremiah, would you like to come and give us some pointers as to how the presentation for the public, for the non-scientists should be? I think it was quite technical. And many of us don't understand all these things. We have a discussion here amongst the clever people.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity. This was a very scientific presentation. And part of the reason why we started this whole initiative was it was for management. We wanted to understand what is the management or the activities that the managers are doing in the park that actually influence the animals. We wanted to understand that from a management aspect. So that's why we started this whole game count. But the other thing that Leon left out was why we started the initiative of Friends of the Park. What we wanted to achieve is effective management of protected areas. Because at the present moment, protected areas are funded by central government, and that's always not effective. So the whole initiative of Friends of the Park was to bring in individual people so that they can walk in the park. It's not only game count. I think during my time, we had engineers coming in to look at the infrastructure that was constructed. We had mechanics coming in to come repair certain boreholes, come repair trucks. And we just wanted to create that relationship because as the minister, we actually do not have, or we did not have those resources. So with that being said, I think she highlighted some important key factors on the different animals, and she's trying to explain why those why the observations are like that. Let me just start with the Rhones first. Khaudum actually hosts the highest Rhone population in Southern Africa. And it's also interesting to note that most of the Rhone species that are in Namibia, most of them majority originated from Khaudum. But one thing that we did in Khaudum, when I started there, I wanted to manage fire. So in my quest to effectively and efficiently manage fire, I actually created a problem. And those numbers of Rhones that you see is because of this problem. So what we did is we implemented the early burning. And the early burning actually had a huge impact on your Rhone population. And that's where you see, she mentioned somewhere in the waterholes that sits in the riverbeds or in the Omuramba, they had a significant low amount of Rhones. And that's because of the constant burning that is taking place in those riverbed or those Omurambas. And 2 years later, we saw a significant increase in oryx and blue wallabies. And what we did is because Rhone actually prefer the tall grass, so we constantly burn the tall grass to reduce, and we reduce it in favor of your oryx, in favor of your blue wallabies. So that was a management decision that was implemented that had a huge negative impact towards another species. So, but now we're trying to balance the whole situation. But it's also important to note that this area sits on the fireway, and it's highly possible that it will always burn. And it's very important that we manage fire in Khaudum. So that's the whole issue of the road. Coming to the elephant, there was a higher number of elephants in the south of the park. I think in 2019, that was a different situation. And that also had to do because of management. Most of the waterholes in the south had had limited water. And I would say, thanks to Mr. Pillock, I see there's some improvement in terms of facilities in water facilities in the park, in the southern part of the park. And that's why you see that that huge numbers in the south. But one thing about the south of the park is a mix thorn bush savanna, thorn bush woodland savanna. So the southern part of the park actually has a high quality trees or high quality fodder for elephants, and not just elephants, all your animals also. Because in the southern part of the park, that's where you get your Schmidia calariensis, that's where you get your Schmidia papafroides, Sancrociliaris. I think in the south, I also picked up Antephra probescens, Mophigras. In the north, it's more of a woodland savanna, and the nutrient content is quite poor in the north. So that's why you have a significantly low amount of animals in the northern part of the park, because the north is now dominated by your Burkia, it's dominated by Bafia and all those stuff, and those trees don't really have the nutrients that the animals are looking for. What else was your question? Uh, okay, the issue was Iiyambo. Iiyambo was it was not meant to be a waterhole. It does not have sufficient water. Iiyambo was just it was Ministry of Mines and Energy trying to look for diamonds, because on the other side of Botswana they discovered diamonds. So they went to drill with the intention of also finding diamonds, but unfortunately they found the kimberlite, immature diamond. So, and they also came they came across the waterhole. So we told them to keep the waterhole open. But there is not sufficient water, and that's why you see at Iiyambo they usually don't pump water. So and that could actually explain the low numbers. And I'm even shocked that it's quite high. But yeah. And with Tarikora, Tswana Fontaine sits in the southern part of the park. It's the far south. And I think that explains the movement between 99 into the park and also out of the park. But the shock that I'm seeing is Tarikora. Tarikora has a high amount of animals, which is quite shocking, but I would think this would be influenced by Botswana, their decision to start hunting. I think that would actually explain those numbers, because Tarikora sits more towards the east of the park, and usually Tarikora never used to have that amount of animals. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is your carnivores. Quickly go to your carnivores. One thing that we found in 2019, we actually found that the carnivores actually partitioned themselves in Khaudum National Park, and it's a bit difficult to tell from this map. But what we wanted to understand is, why was there a sudden increase in human-wildlife conflict on the western part of the park? So when we divided the information, or when we presented the information, we actually presented it differently, and you could actually see the reasons. I don't know whether it's still the same, but in 2019, you had your lions more towards the east and your hyenas more towards your west. And you could see a clear distinction that they were overlapping, but they were concentrated on one side. And that's where you got, I think 10 lions were killed in Botswana, but most of the wild dogs, most of your hyena were more towards the west, and they were actually causing huge problems towards the west. But with your wild dog, I saw your wild dogs are not moving anymore. I don't know what you guys are doing to my farm, but technically, the wild dogs in Khaudum move quite huge distances. I think what that means is, where they are located, that might just be a dead. So that has nothing to do with the movement. It's close to a dent, and the collared individual stayed in that area next to the dent. But your wild dogs actually move long distances. Anything else, Novald, that I forgot?
Can you hear me? The Zoom people? Participants on Zoom? Friends on Zoom? Okay. The question was the period of when these individuals were collared. It was less than a year. Yes. I don't know if we have any other questions from the floor. Kenneth.
Don't we want to see an estimate of the certain species for the count in general? Like we had approximately 4,000 illy, 600 Rhone. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, I don't have the figures in my head, but I can get those for you. We do have them. Yes.
Hello, Novald. I think my comment is also linked to that. I wanted to make a proposal that maybe next time when we meet, we also indicate a number of species, different species. And it also relates to what Jeremiah said about the management actions, the early burning, late burning, and how that may impact on the species density and distribution. So it will be nice to have a understanding as to what these species are doing, how many we are counting, and how that is changing over time, so that we can see if there is a need for intervention. Also, because of the large carnivores that we find inside the park, it will be good to understand what prey species they prefer, because we tend to see Khaudum as an area where excess large carnivores like lions could be reintroduced. We have introduced lions in that area. Most of them ended up being killed outside of the park boundaries. We also try and need to understand why are these lions leaving this park? What is the prey biomass like? Is the habitat not suitable inside the park? Why would they leave the park and prey on livestock outside and then get killed in that process? I also wanted to comment on the elephant numbers. I think, Jeremiah, if you look at the 2019 elephant survey, so 2013 and 2015, if I'm not mistaken, we have done aerial surveys in that Khaudum area. In 2019, we observed that there were high concentration of elephants in the Nainai Conservancy and also in southern parts of Khaudum National Park. So maybe that explains why you picked up a lot of elephant activities around those water points. We have also picked up that the numbers of elephants have increased in Khaudum National Park, and we are suspecting that these elephants may have come in from Botswana and also from some parts of Khaudum. You know, when those semi-commercial farms came up on the western boundary, we are not yet sure what the impact is on the movements, because in a wet season, elephants would venture out into those areas. Now they can't go out there anymore, so maybe they prefer to go into the Nainai Conservancy. We know in Nainai Conservancy, some artificial water points were also set up, and that may also have attracted more elephants to the southern parts of Khaudum, overflowing into the Nainai Conservancy. So that was just my contribution. And I think if there's anyone interested in among the friends of the parks to take on these research questions, Jeremiah, also with your students, I think there is wealth of data available that can be analyzed. I think Novald mentioned that he has challenges with data entry and data analysis. I think Novald is the only scientist responsible for the Northeast. Of course, he gets supported by Pete Badel from Windhoek, but between the two of them, it's too much work, and we want to make sense out of this data that is collected. For example, when you're at the waterhole, 72 hours, you pick up a lot of activities, interactions between animals. You also collect the arrival times and departure times of these animals from the waterholes that can maybe tell you a story about how these animals are sharing these water resources. And it's just good to make sense out of it and build some stories that can be told when people sit around the fires using research. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kenneth. I also just remembered one other recommendation that I actually have for us as participants of the game count, which is I highly need your contribution in terms of the photographs taken during the game counts, because they can explain a whole lot of activities, as well as all the behavioral interactions that you've seen at the water holes. If you can just actually note them down, because I'm not, or Pete is not, I'm not able to see all the other interactions that are happening at the water holes, but we all see very interesting factors. I think I remember once, was it Crystal that said there was a lion and a leopard fighting, or which one was it? Yes. So all these stories are actually very good stories, and they can actually contribute to us understanding the data if we can somehow have a platform where we can just submit all the good things that we have seen at the waterholes or along when you have been driving through the park, because it contributes. It's not only about us counting, but some things you'd see when you're not counting. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? There's more glühwein to be finished. Okay, there's another question.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very informative. I would like to know more about the practical aspect of the game counting process. So you have 14 waterholes, and you need at every waterholes, you need 4 cars with 2 people in each car for 5 days, if I understand it correctly. So how is the duty between these cars, for instance, distributed? Is every car 6 hours on duty, or if you only have 3 cars, maybe 8 hours on duty? How is it shared between the cars? Where do these people stay? Do they camp next to the water holes in a certain distance? Do they have open fires in the evening when they are they say a certain distance away from the water holes? How does this process in fact run?
Okay, for those people that are thirsty, go and get yourself some glühwein in the meantime. It's not about the number of cars, it's about the number of people. You have to count for 72 hours non-stop. So that means the older you are, the more difficult to stay awake on shifts for 4 hours, especially at nighttime when it's the dead hours. So you need to be somewhere between 6 and 8 people per waterhole. You can be in 1 car, you can be in 2 cars. It's not about the number of cars, it's the people, it's the counters. So what you normally do is you have to be 2 people on a shift, whether it's 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. You as a group decide how you want to do it. And you have to be 2 people, the observer and the scribe. And then you do your recordings, and then you change your shifts. You stay at the waterhole for those 72 hours. It's a breakdown next to the road. You have to be totally self-sufficient for these 3 days at the waterhole. You camp at the waterhole. Now, obviously, if you make a fire and you make a braai, you will compromise your own experience, because the fire and the smell of the brine zone will scare off many of your wildlife that you actually want to see. So you have to prepare your food, your menu, and all the stuff in such a way that you can prepare it quickly on a gas cooker, pre-cook your things, do your bolognese, do your goulash or whatever, and just heat it up. You are sitting there at the waterhole for 72 hours non-stop. It will be very hot. So you need to have a lot of shade. You need to have your toilet facilities. You need to have enough water to wash yourself, for your kitchen, for your coffee, for all the stuff. So you need to be geared quite well. You have to build your camp around the height in such a way that you are safe, because you will live towards the water. You will observe the water. So your backside must somehow be safe and secure, with a car parked with your cars and tents and wind nets and whatever. Make it comfortable. It's tough work, but you should also have fun with it. And it's a lot of enjoyment. There's a lot of experience you'll never see, because you're seeing the whole movie. It's not like visiting a park, driving through. You just see small individual happenings. You are in a movie. Enjoy the movie for 72 hours. So make it comfortable, but you have to think about safety. Your fridge will not last because you're not driving. If you don't have additional solar panels, if you don't have a silent pack generator, your fridge will not go the 3 days non-stop. These are the type of things, as Novald pointed out, your observation equipment, good binoculars, night sight equipment, wärmebild camera, this type of stuff. The better you are equipped, the more you will see stuff. We had good years with good environmental conditions, full moon, no dust, no smoke, no clouds. But we had terrible conditions where it was like a new moon night. It was so dark. And if you didn't have this additional equipment, you just didn't see anything. Okay, this is something that Novald should have explained to us all. How do they take this data that they receive from us? I'm not the scientist, but there's drinking frequencies where an elephant would drink every 1.5 days or something. So what they do is, when they take this data and they add it all up, and then they've got formulas that they apply, and then they come to actual estimated figures. So in a 3-day period, you might see certain elephant herds. You might count them twice, or you might have counted it on day 1, and on day 3 on another waterhole, another group would have seen that same herd. But this is their work. They know how to evaluate this information. They've got formulas and things how they apply to get to the actual numbers. And this is something that Novald should have actually told us, is we have observed so many elephants at a particular waterhole. But the whole calculation for the year, the estimated number of elephant, whatever figure. So this is not, so you just do the counting. But the evaluation and the actual numbers is what the scientists then work out. Okay. We hope we'll have some campfire talks, and we'll discuss all this. I think Jeremiah's got some information with regards to the 2019 count, where he did exactly that. Is where he knows the numbers that were counted over the 3 days. And then he's got the actual calculated number of that particular species. In the meantime, okay.
Okay, thank you. again would like to really appreciate what the ministry is doing in terms of wildlife management and protected area management. And the other thing that I'm noticing is also a very interesting journey by Novald, Iiyambo, where you are quite interested and passionate about the work that you do. Following your journey from Gobabeb, going to Pretoria, now you are in the Northeastern Protected Area Network. And I'm just afraid that the passion that you develop will probably end if eventually you are poached, for example, by the University of Namibia. So in order to counter that, is there any structured way in which the information that you collect as scientist is structurally arranged and regular scientific outputs are uniformly produced across all the national parks in Namibia in order to counter the recurring brain drain within the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism? I was at the coast and there was a passionate fellow also within a park there, very interested in birds called Damaraton, but with his movement to a development partner funded project, that passion died. So how do we counter such, not natural death, but death in the passion and in terms of conserving your very important species in parks?
I think Kenneth can answer that one.
No, that is the reality. Unfortunately, that is how life is. So the good thing here is we poached Novald from the University of Namibia. So Novald made a promise that he will not go back to University of Namibia. But of course, as you have seen, Novald is passionate about research, passionate about sharing information, educating, and so on. So we are working on a collaborative program with the University of Namibia campus in Katima. We are also trying to create some environment. It's a program that was supported by the project that Heinrich Pillock worked for, where we try to create some facilities and access to our protected areas to the university students and their lecturers. That's why I was also extending an invitation to Jeremiah. So it's open, and that's one way in which we are trying to build capacity and retain such capacity within Namibia. Whether that capacity is within the ministry or it's with outside, as long as that capacity and interest and passion is within Namibia, we are really good to go. It's very good to put up systems in place so that whatever data is collected is curated, is stored, and is looked after, and whoever is a scientist can then build on that data set so that one can have long-term monitoring data to be able to see how the system is changing with time. Climate change, different rainfall regimes, high rainfall variability, our own management interventions, how are they impacting on the wildlife species, and so on. So it's a very valid point to have a system to collect and look after data that we collect, and also to make sure that this is institutionalized, so it's not individual driven, but it's driven and owned by the institution. So the scientists or people can change, but you have a system that can carry on.
I just wanted to add a bit more information on the question from Husta. Sorry if I pronounce it wrong. You asked on how we can avoid counting one animal twice. Scientifically, you can't avoid it. You can only minimize it, but not eliminate it. Because the only way you could honestly eliminate it is when you have tagged or marked individuals. But in cases of a census, there is always an error calculation that is always involved. Unfortunately, I couldn't show you the the exact total numbers versus the calculations that I've made. And that's where the fault was. But the figures that I actually gave here was already a calculation of the 3 days of the 72 hours. Yes, so you can't really avoid it. You can try by all means to minimize counting the same individual twice, which is, let me say, within the same 5 minutes or 2 minutes, you see a lion and then it comes back again, or an elephant, then you would assume maybe that's the same individual. But otherwise, there's not much really that you can do.
We got all questions sorted.
Okay. We've got from our Zoom viewers, we've got a question with regards to when the early burning will be done. It appears that Christo and his team, they were up there last week, and from the feedback so far, it appears that we've done the early burning for this year. We will do some follow-up now in the next 2-3 days with Thomas, with the warden up there, and confirm whether it's still necessary to have another effort from the Friends of Khaudum to go and assist with early burning. Other than that, there's potentially, we still have to clean the water troughs. There's a lot of plant growth in it. There's a lot of sand especially in the elephant troughs. They are blocking the overflows. But we will check this during the next couple of days to confirm whether the staff can manage on their own. If so, then the second week of July, there will be another trip up there. And if there's anyone who wants to participate and help, they must just contact me and we can discuss further arrangements.
Okay, so everybody heard, contact Leon. If you're looking for contact details, we've got his contact details, and I'm sure he's still going to be able to give them to you here tonight. For the Zoom viewers, please do send us an email. We have no problem sharing the presentation that we were given today. I've also received word that I can get the report of 2019, which I'm also able to share with parties interested.
Okay. Yeah, then to just close off, I just want to inform you guys, I will send out emails to all our captains and so on. The first game count this year, 9 to 14 August. We had some cancellations, and at this point in time, we've got 3 waterholes that can still be or needs to be occupied to be covered. So if there's any people interested, or if you know of somebody, please, we need still to cover 3 waterholes. Then September is unfortunately fully booked, and there's even a waiting list for September. Then with regards to the wild dog survey, the trackings, the tour survey, which is also planned for September, we got confirmation from Pete and Lisa that we'll do that from 3 to 6 September. That means just those 4 days before the count. We also need some vehicles. We need help there. So if there's anybody who's interested in assisting us with a spoor survey, please contact me so that we can discuss further details. And then the third game count, 6 to 11 October. I also have 2 waterholes still to be occupied. So if there's anyone interested, please let me know. It's actually, they were booked, and it's the 2 most popular waterholes, but we had cancellations. So Tsao and Tarikora, they are up in October. Yeah, and then Jeremiah is now at NUST. Novald came from UNAM. We've been trying for 3 years to get students. We need young people. We need students to get involved. So there's one of the waterholes that we assign to the park staff so that they're also part of this whole exercise. My suggestion is, please try and get some students to sit with the park staff at Iiyambo. would be much appreciated. We need the young people. We are getting old. We are getting tired. Okay, that's from my side.
Thank you very much for a very interesting talk.
Thank you very much.
I
Thanks,
always
Novald.
thought,
Thanks, Jeremiah. Thank you, Kenneth. And thanks for all the Zoom viewers.
I always thought Khaudum is just about counting some animals, and now I notice it's a whole lot more. Thank you, Novald, for your time, your efforts, and please let us have the final report when you're done. Please, those that haven't filled in this form, please do so when you leave. And as Leon keeps on saying, there's still some glühwein left. Let's have another glass and a chat.